I've never been the best with crowds. I don't mean I get claustrophobic or anything dramatic like that. I just don't have a great sense of direction when there are a million people around, especially when they're all moving in different directions. So, when my friends convinced me to come to this massive music festival that weekend, I was already a little on edge. But hey, live a little, right? The festival itself was one of those sprawling outdoor events, with stages scattered across a giant park, food trucks lining every path, and people of every shape and color blending into this chaotic, buzzing energy. I'd been excited at first, mostly because my friends promised that the lineup was insane and that I'd meet some cool people. I didn't expect to get completely lost less than an hour after arriving. So there I was, standing near the entrance of one stage, trying to text my friends to figure out where they'd gone, when I looked up and realized I had no clue which way to turn next. The crowd was thick, like a river of bodies flowing every which way, and I felt like a small rock stuck in the middle. My phone was acting up and the battery was nearly dead. Great timing, right? I tried to stay calm, but the more I looked around, the more overwhelmed I got. That's when I noticed him. He wasn't part of the crowd's frenzy. He was on the edge of it, near a vendor selling lemonade, looking like he was people watching, but not really in a rush. He had this calm, steady vibe about him, kind of like the eye of the storm. I remember thinking, okay, either this guy knows what's up, or he's as lost as I am. But something about his relaxed smile made me feel like maybe he could help. Before I could even work up the nerve to ask, he called out, "Hey, you look a bit turned around. Need a hand?" And honestly, I couldn't have been more relieved. I blurted out, "Yeah, actually, I'm trying to find my friends, but this place is like a maze." He laughed, this easy, warm laugh that made me forget for a second how stressed I'd been. "You're not the first. This festival's famous for swallowing people whole. I'm Matt, by the way." I told him my name, and just like that, the weird tension started to lift. He had this way of making everything feel less chaotic, even in the middle of a sea of strangers. Matt offered to walk me to the main stage area, where he said the crowd was thinner and easier to navigate. As we started moving, I caught myself glancing over at him. His hair was tousled in a way that looked effortless, but cool, and he had these bright eyes that seemed to notice the little things, like the way I kept checking my phone nervously. We fell into an easy rhythm, chatting about bands, food trucks, and how neither of us really knew what we were doing there. I don't know why, but talking to him didn't feel like just passing time. It felt like I'd found a small island of calm in a place that was otherwise totally overwhelming. And just when I thought I was about to finally get reunited with my friends, we stumbled into a part of the festival that neither of us recognized. The music was different, the crowd had changed, and suddenly I realized I was completely lost again. Only now, I wasn't alone. Matt looked at me and smiled, like he knew this was only the beginning of what was about to happen. That's when I knew this wasn't just another day at a festival, and I had no idea how much that unexpected moment would change everything. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and faces, the kind of place where the music felt heavier and the air a little thicker. Matt glanced around, a slight crease forming on his forehead like he was trying to place where we'd ended up. "Okay, so this wasn't on my mental map either," he admitted, sounding more amused than worried. I laughed, feeling oddly comforted that he wasn't some festival expert after all. "So what now? We just wander until we find a sign that screams, 'You're here?'" I asked, half joking, but also kind of serious. Matt shrugged, then pointed to a little coffee tent just off to the side. "How about we grab a drink? Might help us figure things out." We weaved through the crowd, and the closer we got, the more I noticed details about him, the way his hand moved to tuck a stray lock of hair behind his ear, the sly grin he gave when I tripped over a loose cable and barely caught myself. It felt strange. Here I was, barely knowing this guy for 20 minutes, and yet I didn't want to be anywhere else. At the coffee tent, the barista was slammed, but Matt somehow charmed our way to the front, asking for 2 espressos to fuel the lost souls. We found a quieter patch of grass nearby and sat down, letting the buzz of the festival wash over us without swallowing us whole this time. So, Matt started, "What made you come here if you're not exactly a crowd guy?" I took a sip of the horrendously strong espresso and shrugged. I guess my friends wanted to get me out of my comfort zone. Plus, I thought it'd be fun to see some live music, meet interesting people, and, maybe have a little adventure. He grinned, but there was something soft in his eyes, like he understood more than he let on. Sounds like you got the adventure part at least. Yeah, adventure is right, I said, then caught myself. What about you? You don't look like the typical festival crowd. Matt laughed again, this time quieter, a little more genuine. Yeah, I'm more of a come for the vibe, stay for the people kind of guy. I work nearby, so I sometimes stop by when there's something cool going on. But mostly, I just like watching how it all unfolds, like people watching Amplified. I nodded, feeling like I was peeling back a layer I wasn't expecting to find. Usually, conversations like this at festivals are surface level. Who's playing next? What's the best food stand? Stuff like that. But with Matt, it felt different. We talked for a while, and the sun started to dip lower in the sky, turning everything golden. The crowd shifted too. People gathering more around the main stages, some starting to leave. I checked my phone again, still no replies from my friends. I'm starting to think they ditched me, I said, half laughing, half sighing. Matt gave me a look that was part sympathetic, part mischievous. Maybe they're hiding because they know you're hopeless at this. I rolled my eyes but didn't protest. Yeah, probably. Just then, the energy shifted. A new act was about to start on the stage closest to where we were, and the bass thumped through the ground like a heartbeat. The crowd pulled us along, and before I knew it, we were moving toward the stage together, side by side. We found a spot in the middle of the crowd where Matt made sure I wasn't cramped or uncomfortable. He leaned in and shouted over the music, "I'm glad you're not alone anymore." I smiled back, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Me too. As the band played, I watched Matt out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't just some random guy who helped me find my way. He was someone I wanted to know better, someone who made being lost feel like less of a problem. After the set, Matt suggested grabbing some food before the night got too wild. We found a taco truck, and as we waited, the conversation flowed easily. Music, life, the small weird things that make people who they are. What's your story? I asked when it was finally our turn. Matt's smile softened. I'm a bit of an artist, I guess. I paint mostly, but nothing fancy. It's more like therapy. That's cool. I've always wanted to get into something creative, but never really knew where to start. He handed me my tacos and shrugged. It's never too late. We sat on a curb nearby, eating and sharing stories about where we came from, what we wanted, and the little moments that shaped us. It was one of those rare conversations where time doesn't feel rushed or forced. It just happens. At some point, I realized the night had completely fallen, lights flashing everywhere, music pulsing louder. But with Matt, the chaos seemed to fade into a background hum. When I checked my phone again, there was finally a text from my friends. Sorry, got stuck at another stage. Meet you by the Ferris wheel in 20? I showed Matt the message, and he nodded. Looks like your ride's coming, but part of me didn't want it to end. The thought of walking away from this, walking away from him, felt oddly heavy. As we stood up to head toward the Ferris wheel, Matt looked at me with that same easy smile. Hey, if you want, I can stick around for a bit. No pressure. I felt my heart skip, and for a second, I just nodded. Sometimes being lost isn't about not knowing where you are. Sometimes it's about finding the right person who makes getting lost feel like the best thing that ever happened. And that night, standing in a sea of strangers with Matt by my side, I finally understood that. We started walking toward the Ferris wheel, the crowd thickening as more people converged on that iconic spot. The wheel itself was lit up like a giant beacon, spinning slowly against the darkening sky. I kept stealing glances at Matt, trying to figure out what to say next. I felt like I'd stumbled into this weird, perfect moment, one that didn't exactly fit into my usual awkward festival-goer script. So I said, trying to sound casual, "Do you come to these things often? Or was tonight just a lucky coincidence?" Matt laughed, that easy, genuine laugh again. I'm more of a when I'm bored or need inspiration kind of guy. Festivals are like this melting pot of creativity and chaos. It's weirdly refreshing. Sounds like you've got it figured out, I said, though honestly, I didn't feel like I had much figured out at all. He shrugged. The kind of relaxed movement that made it look like nothing was ever a big deal. Nah, I'm still figuring it out, just like everyone else. We reached the Ferris wheel and spotted my friends in the crowd, waving frantically. Relief hit me like a rush of cold water. "There they are," I said, pointing them out. But then I looked back at Matt, who was watching the scene with a faint smile. "Go on," he said quietly. "I'll be around." And just like that, it felt like a subtle goodbye, even though no one had said anything about leaving or ending the night. I hesitated. Normally, I would have sprinted to my friends without a second thought, but something about Matt's presence made me pause. "Hey," I said, catching his attention. "Do you want to hang out a bit longer? Maybe catch the late-night sets together?" His smile widened, and he nodded. I'd like that, so instead of plunging back into my friend group, I stayed with Matt. We found a quieter corner where the music wasn't as loud, and the crowd was thinner. It was like stepping into a bubble, just the two of us in the middle of all the noise. We talked about art again, his passion for painting, my half-hearted attempts at photography. He showed me a photo he had taken earlier in the day on his phone, a candid shot of a kid holding a balloon framed perfectly against the sky. It was simple but captured something real. "That's amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. "You have a good eye," he shrugged shyly. "Thanks." It's mostly about paying attention. There was this quiet moment when the festival lights seemed to dim a little in the background. I realized we'd been sitting there for nearly an hour just talking, like we'd known each other for years, not a few hours. Then, out of nowhere, Matt said, "I'm really glad you got lost tonight." I blinked, caught off guard. Me too. We looked at each other, the kind of look that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. It was like an unspoken acknowledgement that something real was happening here, something neither of us wanted to ignore. The crowd shifted again, and a band started playing a slower, more intimate set on a nearby stage. Matt stood up and held out his hand. "Dance with me?" I laughed, a little surprised but also thrilled. I don't know if I'm much of a dancer. "That's okay." "Neither am I," he said with a grin. We moved closer to the music, and for the first time that night, I let myself get lost not in the crowd, but in the moment, with him. The way he moved was casual, but sure, and I found myself matching his rhythm without thinking. As the song faded, Matt pulled me in just a little closer and whispered, "I don't want this night to end." Neither did I. But reality was waiting. My friends, the rest of the festival, the fact that we barely knew each other's names beyond the surface. Still, as we stood there under the glow of the Ferris wheel's lights, I realized something important. Sometimes, you don't need to find your way on your own. Sometimes, the best things happen when you let someone else lead you a little. And with Matt standing beside me, I was ready to see where this unexpected detour would take me. We stood there, just the two of us, the Ferris wheel spinning slowly behind Matt, casting a soft glow over everything. The music from the nearby stage still hummed low, but it felt less like noise and more like a soundtrack to what was happening between us. I kept thinking about how surreal it was that I'd come to this festival expecting to just survive the chaos, and here I was, completely caught up in something unexpected. Matt broke the silence first. "So, what's the plan now? You want to catch the late shows, or maybe sneak off somewhere quieter?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stick with my friends and not miss out on the rest of the night. But part of me, the part that felt lighter and somehow braver around Matt, just wanted to stay right where I was. "I don't know," I admitted. "Honestly, I was thinking of heading out soon. It's been a lot," he nodded, like he totally understood. "Yeah, festivals can be exhausting, but if you want, I know a spot nearby that's way less crazy. We could go grab a drink, just chill." The idea of escaping the noise and the crowd sounded too good to pass up. Plus, something about the way he said it made me think this wasn't just about the spot. It was about hanging out with him. "Yeah, let's do that," I said. We headed off the main festival grounds, weaving through less crowded streets lined with small food stalls and neon signs. The city was still alive and buzzing, but quieter, more intimate. Matt led me into a dimly lit bar that felt like a hidden gem. Wooden floors, soft jazz playing, and a hum of low conversation. We settled at the bar, ordered drinks, and found ourselves sliding into an easy conversation again. It was like no time had passed since the chaos of the festival. So, Matt said, swirling his glass, "What brought you to the city originally?" I looked into my drink, thinking. "Work mostly. I moved here about a year ago. It's been a lot to adjust to." He nodded, eyes serious now. "Yeah, new city, new people. It can be tough. Did you know anyone before you moved?" "Not really," I admitted. "Just a couple of colleagues. Mostly, it's been me figuring things out on my own." "Sounds lonely," he said softly. It was, but hearing it out loud made it feel less heavy. "Yeah, it was," I said. "But tonight feels different. Meeting you, I guess. It's like, for once, I'm not just this guy trying to keep up." Matt smiled that quiet smile again. "I get that. I've been there." I found myself watching him, wanting to know more. "What about you? What's your story?" He took a slow sip of his drink, then leaned in a bit. "I'm a painter, mostly abstract stuff. I moved here to chase that passion, but it's been a rocky road." I raised my eyebrows. "That's brave." He shrugged, but there was an edge of something. Maybe vulnerability? Maybe, but it's who I am. The conversation drifted toward dreams and fears, the kind of deep stuff I usually keep under wraps, but with Matt, it felt safe to open up, like we were building something stronger than just a random festival encounter. At one point, I caught his gaze and felt my heart skip. "Do you want to get out of here?" he asked suddenly, voice low. I blinked, surprised but intrigued. "Where?" He smiled mischievously. "I have a rooftop nearby. The city skyline from there is insane. Plus, it's quiet." I hesitated for a second. This was moving fast. But honestly, I didn't want the night to end. Not like this. "Okay," I said. We left the bar and navigated through narrow streets until we reached a modest apartment building. Matt buzzed the door code, and we took the elevator up. When the door slid open onto the rooftop, the city stretched out in every direction, lights twinkling, the bustle below softened by distance. We stood side by side, the cool night air wrapping around us. "This is amazing," I said, feeling a little breathless. Matt shrugged, but his eyes were sparkling. "Sometimes you just have to escape to the top to see things clearly." We talked some more, but the conversation slowed, and the silence between us grew comfortable. Then, out of nowhere, Matt reached over and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. My heart jumped. I looked at him, and he was watching me, really watching me, in a way that made my skin tingle. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, his lips were soft, tentative at first, then sure, the world fell away. I forgot about the festival, the crowd, the city. There was just this moment, a moment where everything felt right. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, dizzy in the best way. "Wow," I said, laughing nervously. Matt grinned. "Yeah, wow." We stayed on that rooftop for hours, talking, laughing, and stealing kisses under the city lights. I realized that sometimes getting lost leads you exactly where you're supposed to be, and with Matt by my side, I was ready to find out just how far that could go. The sky was starting to lighten just a bit when we finally came down from the rooftop, like the city couldn't quite decide if it wanted to keep the night or start the day. Matt's apartment was one flight down, modest but cozy, with a handful of canvases leaning against the walls and paintbrushes scattered around like they'd been abandoned mid-thought. It felt so personal, a little chaotic, and somehow exactly what I'd imagined his place would look like. We sat on the couch, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye or even stop talking. The exhaustion from the festival and the adrenaline from the night were settling into a warm, quiet buzz between us. "So," Matt said, breaking the silence, "what now?" "We've got the whole city in front of us." I laughed softly, feeling the weight of the question. "Honestly, I don't know. I'm supposed to meet my friends in a few hours to wrap up, but after tonight, I'm not sure I want to go back to just being that guy who gets lost in crowds." He smiled, eyes reflecting the soft morning light creeping through the window. "Maybe you don't have to be that guy anymore." There was something in the way he said that, something hopeful, challenging even. It made me think about how easy it was to get stuck in old patterns, to settle for the familiar because it feels safer. I like that idea, I said, feeling a sincere smile spread across my face. We spent the next hour just talking, really talking, about everything from music and art to the dumb fears that hold us back. I shared stories about moving to the city, the loneliness I'd felt, the way I'd convinced myself I had to do everything alone. Matt listened, not interrupting, just giving me the space to say what was on my mind. When it was his turn, he opened up about his own struggles, how chasing art wasn't just passion, but a way to prove to himself that he could make something meaningful out of the chaos life threw at him. He told me about the nights he spent staring at a blank canvas, wondering if he was fooling himself. It was raw, real, and it made me respect him more than I thought possible. At some point, the sun had fully risen, and the city outside was waking up. I glanced at my phone, messages from my friends piling up with no way to respond. Part of me felt guilty, like I was abandoning them, but the other part knew I needed to be somewhere else. Matt caught my look and smiled gently. "Don't worry about them. If they're good friends, they'll understand." I nodded, grateful for the kindness. "Yeah, maybe you're right." We finally decided to get some breakfast, and Matt suggested a little cafe nearby. On the walk there, the city felt different, not loud and overwhelming, but alive and full of possibilities. The cafe was small, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu scribbled in colorful chalk. We ordered coffee and something called a morning hug sandwich, whatever that was, and found a table by the window. While we waited, Matt reached across the table and took my hand. It was casual, but it sent a jolt through me, like electricity, in the most beautiful way. "So," he said, fingers gently squeezing mine, "what's your next move now that you're not lost anymore?" I smiled, feeling something shift inside me, a mix of nervous excitement and comfort. "Honestly, I want to see where this goes, with you." His eyes softened, and he leaned in just a little. "Me too." We talked about meeting again, making plans that didn't feel rushed or forced, but natural, like something we both wanted to explore. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful, like maybe this city wasn't just a place where I got lost, but a place where I could find something real. Later that day, when I finally caught up with my friends, they could tell something had changed. I told them about Matt, about how a chance meeting in the chaos of a festival turned into a night I wouldn't forget. They teased me, of course, but I could tell they were happy for me. Over the next few weeks, Matt and I kept seeing each other. Quiet dinners, art shows, lazy afternoons exploring parts of the city neither of us had known before. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how lucky I'd been to get lost that night. Because sometimes, losing your way is just the beginning of finding exactly what you need. After those first few weeks, things between Matt and me started to settle into a rhythm that felt both easy and unexpected. We weren't rushing or trying to force anything. That whole frantic energy of the festival night had mellowed into something more genuine. I found myself looking forward to our little escapes from the city noise, wandering through art galleries, hunting down the best street food, or just lounging in his apartment with paint-stained walls and half-finished canvases watching old movies. One Sunday afternoon, we ended up at this tiny, tucked-away bookstore that neither of us had noticed before. It was the kind of place where the smell of old paper hits you like a warm hug the moment you walk in. We spent hours browsing, occasionally pulling out books and reading passages to each other, laughing at the weird and wonderful stories tucked between the shelves. At one point, I found an old collection of poems and read a few lines aloud. Matt listened, eyes bright, the light filtering through the windows, catching the dust in the air like tiny stars. "I never thought I'd like poetry," I admitted, feeling a little sheepish. He smiled that slow, knowing smile. That's the thing about discovering new parts of someone, and yourself. It sneaks up on you. As we left the bookstore, the sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows over the streets. We didn't say much, just walked side by side, the city humming softly around us. Later that week, things got a little more real. Matt invited me to visit his art studio, a small space he rented in a converted warehouse. When I arrived, it was like stepping into a whole other world. Canvases leaned against every wall, some finished, others just splashes of color and shape. Brushes and paint tubes were scattered across an old table, and the faint smell of turpentine lingered in the air. Matt was in the middle of working on a piece, a large canvas covered in bold strokes of blue and gold. He glanced up and smiled when he saw me. "Come here," he said, patting the space next to him. I settled in, watching him work, the way his hands moved confidently yet tenderly across the canvas. "How do you know when a painting is done?" I asked after a while. He shrugged, eyes focused. "When it feels right, when it stops talking to you." I thought about that, how sometimes in life you have to keep listening until something just clicks. "Does it ever get scary?" I asked quietly. "Putting yourself out there like that?" Matt paused and looked at me, this intense, real look that made my heart skip. "Every time, but it's also the only way to grow." That night, as we left the studio and stepped out into the cool air, the city felt different again, like maybe we were carving out our own little corner in this sprawling place, and it was ours. But of course, life has a way of reminding you it's not always simple. A couple of weeks later, I found myself sitting on a bench in the park, waiting for Matt to show up. We hadn't seen each other much. The schedules had gotten crazy on my end, and Matt's studio work was picking up. I was starting to feel that familiar twitch of loneliness creeping back, the one I thought I'd left behind. When he finally arrived, cheeks flushed from running and eyes apologetic, I tried not to let the frustration show. "Sorry I'm late," he said, dropping beside me. Studio ran over. I nodded, wanting to say something like, "It's okay," but instead I blurted, "I miss this, the time we used to have." Matt looked at me, and for a moment, the noise of the park faded. "Me too," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose what we're building. We just have to figure out how to make it work." We talked for hours that evening, about expectations, about timing, about how sometimes wanting something isn't enough if you don't have the space for it. It was hard and honest and messy, but it made me realize something important. Real connections don't always come easy. We decided to slow things down a bit, to stop forcing the moments and let them come naturally. It was a relief and a challenge all at once, but I knew we were both committed. One rainy night, a couple of weeks after that conversation, Matt called me out of the blue. "Come to the studio," he said, voice low. "I have something to show you." I arrived to find the place transformed. The canvas he'd been working on was finished, and it was stunning. An abstract whirlwind of color that somehow captured all the chaos and calm I'd come to associate with him. There was a vulnerability in it, a story I could feel but not fully understand. Matt looked at me, eyes shining with something I wanted to hold on to forever. "This is us," he said softly. "Messy, unpredictable, but real." I moved closer, and without thinking, pulled him into a hug. In that moment, I knew that getting lost that night at the festival wasn't just a random event. It was the start of everything I didn't even know I was searching for. And with Matt, even when things got complicated, I was ready to keep finding my way, together. That night at the studio stayed with me, long after the rain stopped and the city quieted down. Standing there, looking at Matt's finished painting, I realized how far we'd come, from two strangers lost in a sea of festival goers to something that felt solid, honest, and real. The messy colors on that canvas weren't just paint. They were the ups and downs, the moments of confusion, the awkward silences, and the laughter we'd shared. It was imperfect, but it was ours. In the weeks that followed, we found a new balance. Our lives didn't suddenly become effortless, but that didn't matter. We learned to communicate better, to create space when one of us needed it, and to come back together with the same warmth that had sparked when we first met. The city didn't feel quite so intimidating anymore, because I wasn't navigating it alone. One evening as we walked through the park near my apartment, Matt slipped his hand into mine. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything without words. Comfort, belonging, and a quiet promise of what was to come. I squeezed his hand back, feeling that familiar flutter, but this time it was steady, grounded. "Funny how getting lost led me to you," I said, half smiling. He looked at me, eyes soft and steady. "Sometimes the best things happen when you have no idea where you're going." I laughed, but there was truth in that. Life isn't about having every step planned out. Sometimes it's about embracing the uncertainty and finding someone who makes the journey worth it. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. I wasn't just the guy who got lost at a festival anymore. I was someone who had found connection, trust, and maybe even love in the most unexpected way. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything.